Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're going to start off with just a few technical instructions. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I want you to first start by double checking your web browser. If you are using Internet Explorer, remember that that's not a supported browser, and it may cause some issues with your connectivity or audio or visual settings. So just double check. If you are using Internet Explorer, you can always drop out of the meeting and sign right back in using Chrome or Firefox. And understand during the meeting, if you need any technical assistance, you can simply just put it in the chat, as well as click the I need help icon. And you can also download the instructions for attendees in tonight's event board. If you go to your upper right-hand corner and click event board, all of our meeting materials are there for you to download, including the attendee instructions. So welcome again. Tonight's speaker is Aro Majumdar, who's going to be presenting as our Senior Program Manager. Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone knows how to ask a question, and you're going to do that through our chat. So at the bottom, you can log into the chat, and if you press the blue question mark button versus just the enter button or the chat icon, that actually puts it directly into our Q&A. So we will respond to questions at the end of the presentation by posting them on the screen for everyone to see through that Q&A button. So if you end your chat with a question mark or push that blue button, it'll go directly into the Q&A. So here are the instructions, and then you can use this again on your computer, your mobile device, and even calling in directly on the phone for audio only. Before we get started and talk about frequently asked questions, a lot of the questions that you've already submitted or from our past presentations are already online. They're listed on our webpage, as well as if you go into the event board tab tonight, our updated FAQs, which include a lot of the questions that you've already answered, are there for you to browse through. And any additional questions that we get tonight, we'll continue to update those responses on the FAQs, which are located on the Dallas Love Field webpage under our airport projects. So without further ado tonight, Aro, are you ready to start the presentation?
And thank you, everyone. Next presentation. This is the third public outreach meeting we are having on our alternate entry analysis, and we've had two, and then we have another meeting coming up towards the end of this month on September 22nd. So please spread the word, and if you want to, you're welcome to attend again, but do spread the word to your friends and relatives who and neighbors who have not attended one of these meetings. Just inform them that we have another one coming up pretty soon. So what we have here today is, let me go into the agenda. I mean, what's the purpose of our meeting? We'll talk a little bit about why we have this, why are we undertaking the alternate entry project, what's the purpose, what's the need, what's the methods, what are the methods that we are using to for the different, evaluating the different alternatives, what are the critical impacts that we're looking for, and then we also have our recommended list of short list of alternatives that we are going to present to the Transportation Committee this month. We also will talk about the public input survey. We have this survey open since July, and we encourage everyone to take the survey so we know what you are thinking, what your priorities are, and we can shape the project that way. So next slide. So the purpose of this meeting is basically to provide the project information, share the project information with everyone, share updates, inform you of the progress we're making, and most importantly, gather community feedback. So first question is that we get asked a lot is, why do you need an alternate entry? And the answer to that question is twofold. First is we are the nation's busiest medium hub airport. And the only entry to the airport, to Love Field, is through a very busy intersection. The intersection of Mockingbird, Cedar Springs, and Harp Keller Way has over 80,000 cars a day. Harp Keller has almost 30,000 cars, and Mockingbird has over 50,000 cars a day. Very, very busy intersection. That's freeway volumes in Montana and some other states. So as it is, the intersection is busy with non-airport traffic, and then we have airport traffic. Add to that, and it's always a security risk for the airport, because if for some reason something happens at that intersection, the only entry to the airport is blocked, and our passengers cannot enter or leave the airport. And if the first responders need to get to the airport, they're often delayed, because what happens is if there's an incident, Mockingbird backs up, and it can back up around Airdrome and past Denton on both sides. So it's a big headache for us, because we keeps us awake at night as to what would we do if the worst case scenario happens and the only entry to the airport is blocked, and we have some incident where we need to either get first responders to the terminal area, or if we have to evacuate people. So that's definitely an operational risk that we are living with every day. Add to that the fact that since the Wright Amendment was repealed, passenger traffic has increased dramatically at Love Field. But in conjunction with that, due to the booming economy we've had and all the economic activity in the DFW region, non-airport related traffic has also increased significantly on Mockingbird. So the combination of these two factors has had an impact not only on day-to-day operations, but also long-term. We need to address the congestion issues as well as the operational issues, security risks that we know we face. So with that, next slide. So the analysis purpose, again, I went over a little bit of it. Definitely mobility and congestion are an issue, and so is our operational and security risks. So a little bit of background. The Wright Amendment was repealed in 2014. We were anticipating increase in passenger traffic once the amendment was repealed. And so we undertook a traffic study to study the impacts through our master plan update. So the master plan update was initiated back in 2015, right after the Wright Amendment was repealed. And it identified the intersection of Mockingbird Lane and Harp Keller Way as being critical, and they had a recommendation to improve traffic operations for that intersection. They looked at they actually looked at 5 different alternates, all of them on the south side, and then the recommendation of that study was that you grade separate Mockingbird and Harp Keller Way through what's known as a diverging diamond interchange. So basically, then we would grade separate some of the movements. Mockingbird would go underground, all the straight through traffic on Mockingbird would go underground through a grade separated interchange without stopping at Hercules and Cedar Springs. And then the other movements would be at ground level. And that seemed to, the level of service there was improved. In that analysis, it showed to be quite improved. And so that was the recommendation. But what happened was the passenger traffic at Love Field was increasing way faster than what we had anticipated. And at the same time, traffic on Mockingbird and the surrounding streets was also increasing much faster than we had anticipated. So when we started looking at implementing the recommendations of the master plan update in 2018, we took fresh traffic counts and realized that we really could not implement that recommendation because it was practically impossible to have the intersection shut down for 18 months while we constructed a grade separation there, and at the same time keep the airport operational. I mean, the impacts on the airport were so severe that we abandoned the idea of grade separating this intersection. At the same time, it would also be very hard to divert 52,000 cars from Mockingbird around on surrounding streets without severely impacting other streets and neighborhoods. So we abandoned that idea and we started looking at an alternate entry, which was not along Mockingbird Lane because of the factors that I'd explained earlier. And we looked at what points of entry would make sense at that time, and came up with just one alternate that we took to a transportation committee. And that alternate was to come in through the north side with a bridge over Bachman Lake and connect to Northwest Highway. So we call that the north entry. We took that to our transportation committee, presented it, and the committee asked us to come back with more options. They wanted us to go and take another look at all the possible options that could be alternate entry points. And they also directed us to make sure that any alternate that we recommend could accommodate automated people mover system. I'll start calling it APM. So that we needed to make sure that in the future, it wouldn't be part of this project at this time. At least we're not, so far we haven't programmed money or put efforts into looking at the feasibility or the cost or design of an alternate, of an APM. But we will be what we are looking at is, can an APM be accommodated in the alternatives that we are evaluating? So that's where we are at this point in time. And let me go to the next slide here. So we came back based on council direction, and we are now evaluating 11 different options and another option called the no build option, which is always whenever we do option analysis for different alternates, we always have a no build option. So that's how we get 12 options that we're evaluating. The ones on the right hand side of your screen, 1 through 5, we have discussed those. They were studied in the original master plan update. And then we had an additional 6 alternates. Number 11's off of Denton Drive. 8, 6, and 9 are off of Shorecrest and Denton, and then one is what's called the midpoint on Shorecrest Drive. Number 9 is Shorecrest and Lemon side entrance. Number 7 is the north entrance we had talked about with the bridge over Bachman Lake and Northwest Highway. And then alternate 10 is an entry through Lemon around where George Coker Circle is today. So we are evaluating those alternates. So the criteria that we are using for, so our analysis is a two-step process. I mean, obviously we cannot go into minute details and the level of effort that takes to go into very detailed analysis of all these options. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, and it really doesn't serve anyone. It's not fair to our passengers who pay for our budget to be spending money on criteria that on alternates that are impractical and cannot meet the basic criteria. So we set for ourselves 4 big routes that we want to evaluate. So obviously traffic impacts was one of them. We want to reduce congestion. We want to reduce vehicle miles traveled. One of our biggest goal is to reduce emission and better air quality and reduce congestion, which also affects that. Per council direction, the ability to accommodate an automated people mover system. And then our operational concern needs to be addressed, which is it will provide us a good alternate route for emergency needs. So those are the 4 big criteria that we are evaluating at this time. So and these criteria will help us. I mean, we've used to reduce the number of alternates from 12 to 5 alternates. So we obviously it was pretty obvious to us that we could not have a no-build alternate because that wouldn't work because of the congestion issues at Mockingbird and Herb Keller Way. And so I'll go over the ones which we alternates first that we looked at and decided that it did not meet our critical criteria. So alternates 1 to 3, as you can see, they all have critical impacts. And one of the reasons for the critical impact is we're not, none of these 3 can actually accommodate a PM system. And that's due to height restrictions because also right-of-way restrictions. I mean, we can't take a lane on Mockingbird Lane and run a APM system without severely impacting traffic. We cannot have an elevated train system because of height restrictions, the runway protection zone. So we have severe constraints. All three alternates we can for APM, so it doesn't work for it. It doesn't reduce. It doesn't have any environmental. None of these have environmental benefits because we're not reducing vehicle miles traveled. We're not reducing emissions. So and then again, like I had explained, if an incident occurs, there's almost instant backup of traffic, which could stretch for half a mile, it could stretch for 1 mile. So any alternate entry on Mockingbird Lane would be blocked in case of an incident. So it doesn't make any sense to put another entry on Mockingbird. So alternates 1 to 3, that's why you see really do not have a lot of benefits based on our criteria. Grade separating the intersection traffic impacts would be mitigated somewhat, but the higher traffic volumes, higher than anticipated traffic volumes, will actually not give us as much benefit as we had thought earlier. And then again, like I said, operationally, it's not going to work. We can't close down the only entry point to the airport while we create separate that intersection. So these alternatives were rejected. And then alternative 4s and 5, they were all similar. They were all on Mockingbird Lane, and so they had the same issues. This slide shows you, like I discussed, that APM integration does not, none of these alternates can accommodate a future APM. Alternate 11 did have VMT reduction. It had good air quality benefits, but one critical flaw with this alternate 11, which is off of, where we it's an entry point off of Denton, about midway through the airfield. But the critical flaw for this alternate was we could not accommodate an APM. And that's because of the proximity of the runway to Denton Drive. And then, so it would be, we could not, a study was done back in 2011 for a standalone APM system from this point. And at that time, it was determined it did not make meet the benefit cost criteria because it was too expensive and did not have enough benefits. And added to that, if we, for our analysis, we determined that we could not, without going through a lot of extra cost and a lot of extra effort, we could not accommodate an APM and still meet the minimum safety grades that an APM system needs. So it's so that's why this alternate was also rejected. So now let's talk about the shortlisted alternatives. We have 5 left of the 12. And now again, when I say 5 left, this still has to be, we have not presented this to the Transportation Committee. What we have done is, what we will be doing is presenting this with our recommendation to the Transportation Committee. So what we're sharing with you is what we plan to present to the committee. So this table summarizes what we've discussed and basically highlights the 5 alternates that we are recommending for further study. I'll go over those alternates one by one here. Alternate 6 is the Shorecrest Drive Central Airfield. Basically, this alternate will create an entry point about midway to the airport property in between the 2 runways from Shorecrest Drive. And if you see, it has, as you can see from the slide, it has positive traffic impacts. Overall, again, we're talking just about overall reduction in vehicle mile travel and overall reduction in emissions, as well as it meets the, it can accommodate an APM system, and it meets our criteria for an alternate entry for emergency needs. And at this point, I want to tell you, like right now, our analysis is very high level. What we're looking at is net reduction in vehicle mile travel, and we're looking at net reduction in emissions. So we have not done ground level analysis of impacts because some of these alternates, especially the ones on Shorecrest Drive, will increase some traffic on Shorecrest. So in our next step, what we will do is we will look at what the impacts are, how to mitigate them, and still maintain or better the existing level of service. So once we're done with this project, it's our commitment that whichever alternate council chooses as the preferred alternate, that project will have net environmental benefits. We'll have net reduction in vehicle miles traveled. We'll have net reduction in emissions, and we will, all the individual intersections or individual streets will maintain or exceed acceptable levels of service. So that's our commitment, and that's how we are progressing with our analysis, our study, and ultimately the project. Alternate 7, this one we discussed briefly, is the alternate that with the bridge over Bachman Lake and touchdown point on Northwest Highway, and the entry through, again, the central airfield. And as you can see, it has positive traffic impacts, it reduces emissions and VMTs, and does provide us an alternate point of entry or exit that's not impacted by incidents at Mockingbird and Hartkeller Way. Alternate 8 is another entry off of at the corner of Shorecrest and Denton Drive. And as you can see from the analysis, the green highlights, it has positive air quality, traffic impacts, and it does meet our criteria for additional entry point. Alternate 9 is another entry point by Lemon and Shorecrest. So it's this entry point in the northeast corner of the airport, and it has similarly good traffic impacts and VMT reductions, and it meets all our APM and additional emergency needs criteria. The last of the recommended alternatives that we are proposing to take to the Transportation Committee is the Lemon Avenue George Coker Circle entry point. So that this alternate will be through Lemon and George Coker Circle. And it similarly has positive traffic impacts and VMT reductions. It can accommodate an APM, even though it's a little lengthy. But we haven't, right now, all we are looking at is whether the APM can be accommodated. If it's feasible to build an APM, we haven't gone into cost-benefit analysis. We haven't gone into any details, except for the fact that it can be accommodated. And additional entry emergency needs, that works too, because it's not impacted by incidents at Mockingbird and Hartkeller Way.
All right, thank you, Aro. I wanted to talk a little bit about the alternate entry public input survey. So as Aro mentioned, currently we have open our public input survey online, which has been open since the beginning of July and will remain open until the end of the month. So our full online survey is available at the links below. And as we talked about, our purpose to do the survey was to get your input and to see what your priorities are. We wanted to gain some understanding of your modes and methods of travel, as well as really understand community priorities and consideration factors. So this survey is open to all of our community members, as well as our airport tenants, customers, passengers, and anybody commuting to the airport. So one thing we wanted to do tonight was to give you a brief portion of that survey so that we can actually respond online tonight to see what your priorities are for everyone in attendance of the meeting. So without further ado, let's just go into that survey, and you can click to enter your answer right on the screen. So we're going to go over a lot of the questions in the survey. And as you see on top of the presentation, you can actually click the link or the click here button to go directly to our online survey to answer in more detail or to give, detailed comments and feedback. But we wanted to just kind of go over some of the questions so you're aware of what's on there and just see what you're thinking for tonight. So we wanted to start off, first of all, just see what zip code you live in so we know where we're getting input from. We definitely want to make sure our community members living around the airport are part of the input. So put it in your zip code, and I can see some of you guys are responding already. Thank you. Moving on to question 2. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, how often did you commute to and from Dallas Love Field? So we wanted to know, are you commuting to the airport every day? Are you a tenant, contractor, employee? Or maybe you're just somebody who's a frequent traveler, somebody coming weekly, maybe every other week. Or maybe somebody that only goes to the airport or is a passenger once a month. Maybe you only go a few times a year, quarterly. Or maybe just once or twice a year annually. Or maybe you're just someone who lives in the community and you don't ever go directly to the airport, but you're traveling in the area, and that would be infrequent. All right, moving on to question number 3. When traveling to and from the airport, what mode of transportation do you normally use? So we're interested in understanding if you're using a rideshare service like Uber or Lyft. Do you take a taxi? Is there any kind of like rideshare van that you might use? Are you using a rental car? Are you taking public transportation? Or are you dropped off or picked up by someone else? Or do you drive yourself and park directly at the airport? And then also, as an option, do you walk or bicycle to the airport? And you can continue down the survey and answer. For number 4, if you do drive yourself to the airport, where do you park? Do you use airport valet parking? Do you self-park in maybe garages A, B, or C? Or do you use our off-airport parking services? And then number 5, from the list provided, tell us what is your number 1 priority in determining an alternate entry to Dallas Love Field. So the choices are, first, environmental impacts, air, water quality, decrease traffic congestion, increase public transit or mobility options, the impact to Bachman Lake, Park, or Trail, increase in neighborhood traffic, and then also safety. So of those options, tell us what you think your number 1 priority is. Then moving down to question number 6. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, did you take alternate routes to avoid the intersection of Mockingbird Lane and Herb Keller Way, Cedar Springs Road, if you were not traveling to the airport? So because of maybe congestion at that intersection, if you're traveling in the area, not going to the airport, did you seek an alternative? So this is just a shortened version of our full survey, which again, you can take by clicking on the click here button and giving us your full input. You can also give us more detailed comments and information, but we kind of wanted to get an idea just for tonight, what you guys are thinking and help us understand what your priorities are as we discuss some of your questions tonight. So we're going to give you just a moment here to continue to respond to those questions. And then while you're finishing to complete our survey for tonight's presentation, you can also continue to submit your questions. And as we move those into Q&A to be responded to after the presentation, you'll see them just pop up in the chat. So that way, you know what questions we're going to be responding to. So, you know, if we have people asking the same questions, as well as you can review, again, our frequently asked questions on our event board tonight, as well as on the Dallas Love Field webpage to see a lot of the responses. We have often the same questions being answered, and we have those responses already listed online. So we're going to give you just another about 10 more seconds here to see what your responses are tonight to the survey, to just gauge what you're thinking and what your priorities are. Okay, so if you want to continue, we got about 10 more seconds. You want to continue answering your questions before we end voting. And then, like I said previously, you can always do the online survey to give us your full input. We wanted to just kind of gauge your priorities and your considerations for tonight. So we're getting ready to close in 5, 4, 3, 2, and last one. All right, we're going to end voting for tonight, but the presentation is, or excuse me, the survey is still open on our online survey, so you can give much more detailed feedback there. So a few things with our full survey. Like I said, you can go to our links. It's available in both English and Spanish. So you can just enter the links as you see here into your web browser to do the survey, which is open until the 30th of September, as well as click the link on top to do the survey now on the full online version. So far, like we said, it's been open since July. And in that time frame, we've already received over 400 responses. And from those 400 plus responses, the map shown here shows all the different area codes where we're receiving the majority of the feedback. So we are definitely seeing that our community members located directly around the airport are providing the most feedback. And you can kind of see the top 5 areas listed in order of where a lot of the community members live that we're giving that feedback from. And then just some of the highlights of information received already in responses. In our question about how often do you commute, you can see here that the majority of people are traveling to the airport every single day. So, you know, maybe they're tenants, contractors, or employees. And you can kind of see the breakdown of other people who responded to the survey and how often they're normally commuting to the airport. And then also when our respondents are traveling to the airport, how are they getting there? So how much or how often are people driving themselves, or are they using a ride share, or, you know, maybe someone else is dropping them off, or even how often people are using public transportation. So you can see the majority of people are actually driving themselves to the airport. And then, you know, we wanted to know if you felt that an alternate entry would actually reduce your travel time in the area. And more than half of people thought yes, that an alternate entry would help their commute. Of course, we're looking at an alternate entry for more reasons than traffic congestion, but we wanted to kind of gauge how the community thought this alternate entry might impact that congestion or their commute. And then tonight on our survey, we asked you what your number 1 priority is, but in the full version of the survey, we asked you to actually rank all 6 of the options given. So based on those options, right now, the respondents have given us the priority, as you see. So the number 1 concern from people who responded is actually the traffic congestion. The second one is safety, with the third being environmental impact. So what is the impact of to our air and our water quality? And then in 4th place was increase the neighborhood traffic. You're definitely concerned if this option would increase traffic in other areas or surrounding roads around the airport. And then what is the impact to Bachman Lake Park or Trail is the 5th most important response. And then the 6th one, or last one, being increased public transit and mobility options. So these are just the actual responses. We definitely recommend you go and give us very detailed input. There's also an option for you to just freeform and give us any additional information as far as what your considerations are, your priorities. And definitely want you to share the survey link with your neighbors and your friends and get their input. We want to make sure that your voice is heard in giving us this input and what you think about additional options in getting to the airport. Okay, so Aro, you want to cover our next steps?
Hello again. So the next steps, where do we go from here? Like I mentioned, we have another public meeting remaining. September 22nd is our next public meeting. It will be the same setting as this. And then we go to the Transportation Committee with our recommended shortlist. If they give us the go ahead, that's when we get into detailed traffic analysis for each and every shortlisted alternatives. That's when we look at impacts to neighborhood, impacts at intersection. We'll look at detailed emission analysis, quantify the number of reduced vehicle miles traveled, look at the a high level feasibility of APM integration with each of these alternatives. And we'll also look at the design feasibility, again, pretty high level, but enough for us to be able to determine whether we want to move forward with uh, any of these alternatives or whether they might have some fatal flaws that we can't see at this point in time. And last but not the least, cost analysis. We need to be good stewards of our passengers' money. So we'll be doing what's called a benefit cost analysis. See if the benefits of the project outweigh the cost of the project. If the cost higher than benefits, then we will not move forward with these with an option. So that's our next steps. And one of the very critical part of this project is gathering input from all stakeholders, our neighbors, our passengers, everybody who uses the airport or is impacted by it. So please spread the word. We do have the survey out, as Donetta mentioned. You can get it on Facebook. Contact us if you have questions. And but do provide us with any and all input and spread the word. And you can contact us. I'll give you Mark Dubner's number, direct number. He is our director, so if you call his number, we'll all be notified. His number is 214-670-6077. And you please also visit our website. You can read more about all the questions that are asked and the answers to those questions at our website. And we have more detailed, a lot of details that is not, we haven't been able to present in the short presentation, but do take a look. It has the presentation in case you want to take another look at it. It has all the questions that people have asked in the previous meetings and answers to them. So frequently asked questions. Let me go over these. What we have done is a lot of the questions are basically asking the same thing in different ways. So we have taken 8 or 9 questions that pretty much cover, maybe 90% of the questions that are asked at our meetings. So I'll start with FAQ number 1. And so this question is consideration being made to how the alternate entry will affect adjacent neighborhoods, such as cut-through traffic? How will Shortlisted Drive or any other entry point impact the surrounding traffic? So the answer is yes. We do always look at impacts to neighborhoods, look at what kind of impacts we are having on neighborhood streets, as well as all the streets in the vicinity, any street that's affected by the project. And we do detailed analysis. So like I had said earlier, our current level of effort is high level. We're looking at overall reduction in vehicle miles traveled and emissions, and just an overall idea of whether the alternate will reduce congestion, but not in very much detail. So our next step will be to go into detailed analysis of traffic impacts. So our analysis so far has been macro level, it's been regional, at a regional level. And the next step, we'll go to micro simulation models, and we'll go to local analysis with detailed traffic volumes, turning movements, intersection capacity improvements, and things of that nature, cut through traffic, impacts to neighborhoods. We'll start looking at all those, okay? And if we find that we need to make mitigation measures, those will be identified, and any impacts will also be identified, and the mitigation measures will also be identified when we go back to council with our recommendation for the preferred alternate. Next question, question number 2. What is the exact process and timeline to get the alternate entry approved? And is it possible to get a task force created at all? Who is the ultimate approver and how does it go? So the simple answer to this question is that the Dallas City Council is the ultimate approver of any project that city staff or city departments undertake. Creation of a task force is also a council, as a purview of the council. The council can appoint a task force, or they can, they can give staff direction, which they have been doing so far, as to what their priorities are that we have been following. For example, the integration of the APM system. So again, I mean, the process right now is we went to council. Council asked us to look at various options. We've looked at them. Based on our initial analysis, we are going to present the 5 shortlisted option to council. And if council asks us to further study these options, we'll do so and come back with the recommended option. And then it'll be up to council to fund the project or ask us to go into design. Question number 3, how can you potentially consider an elevated option at the north entrance across the public park and not do something on the south because it's too high? So that's a great question. But there's, the simple answer to that is that Mockingbird Lane is at about the same elevation as our runways. So when an aircraft takes off or lands, the height restrictions there are more strict compared to the north end. At the north end, our runways are sitting about 40 feet above Bachman Lake level. So the street level, so the runways are considerably higher. So so we have more room vertically to design something at that end. And there's also another factor, at least the 2 options, since we're talking about the bridge. The bridge is in between the 2 runways, so that does give us some more leeway in terms of height restrictions. Question number 4, as the alternate entry options are checked, please consider more than just options for cars. An alternate entrance can also mean an alternate drop-off, a place where people can move quickly and collect without cluttering an area. Keep in mind trains, bicycles, scooters, mass transit, etc. And answer to part of that question, at least, is I've been talking about the automated people mover system, the APM system. That is very much a critical criteria for any of the selected alternates. We are also working that the Department of Aviation has undertaken several projects to improve quality of life and air quality around the airport. We are currently designing the Lemon Avenue project, which will build a bicycle and pedestrian trail from Airdrome Drive all along Lemon Avenue onto Shortlisted Drive and connect to the Bachman Lake Trail. We're also working with the National Park Services to come up with various options for a Lovely Loop Trail, which would put a trail around all of the airport, with preferably both pedestrian and bicycle trails. But if that's not possible, at least one or the other. And that project is also looking at connections to existing trails, regional trails. So that study is underway. So we are looking at alternate modes of transportation, not just cars. And this project, once we know which alternate council prefers, will also incorporate alternate transportation modes. So, one complaint we hear a lot is a lot of these, 4 out of the 5 options somehow are on the north side, which is true. And it's just because just the way the airport's laid out and the criteria that we have to meet for the alternate for the APM, and also reduction of vehicle miles traveled, reduction of congestion. But I'd like to say, given our director's directive, so to speak, to make sure that any project we do has a very strong pedestrian and bicycle elements, each and every of these alternates will also have very strong design elements of bicycle and pedestrian and streetscape enhancement elements. Like I said, as far as transportation impacts are concerned, traffic impacts are concerned, our goal is to at least maintain existing levels of service or make it better. And the same can be is going to be applicable for other elements such as alternate transportation modes and landscaping and trails. So we do keep it in mind. That's our priority too, just as it's yours. Question number 5: with the reduced traffic citywide, why is the project even needed? With the economic impacts and lower flight traffic from the current pandemic, how is this a viable use of taxpayer dollars at this time? So good questions all. I'd just like to clarify something at the very beginning. Department of Aviation is self-funded. We do not use any taxpayer dollars. All our money, all our income comes from our operations, from passenger fares and other revenues that we have, like concessions and tenants. So we do not use taxpayer dollars at all. But to answer the main question, why is this ever needed? So projects such as this will last for 50 years. And we realize that there's always peaks and valleys as far as traffic's concerned, as far as air traffic's concerned, and traffic volumes on the roads are concerned. There are, the economy is cyclic. We have reduced traffic volumes when we have a recession, and that traffic volume on the roads as well as passenger volumes for our airports increase when we have more economic activity. But ultimately, if you take a long-term look over the 20 years or 30 years, the trajectory is always higher. I mean, unless you live in some of the Rust Belt cities, the trajectory, we have more people moving in, we have more traffic on our roads, so that trajectory will keep increasing. As far as the airport's concerned, we know in 2019 we were at a breaking point in terms of congestion, and we hadn't even reached our potential passenger volumes. So we consider this pandemic a temporary dip, but we do not, we always plan for ultimate volumes. So in our case, we anticipate, because of the number of the restrictions on the number of gates that Love Field can have, we had anticipated pre-COVID to be reaching our maximum passenger capacity by 2028. And at this point in time, we can't exactly predict whether it'll be 2028 or 2027 or 2030, but the point is we will be there, and we need to plan for it. Now, these projects won't be built in a day. It'll probably take us 5 years if council approves the project for this to be put in place, and then it's going to serve the citizens of Dallas for 50 years or more. So so this is a long-term project, and we do not consider temporary dips in traffic for temporary situations and for long-term planning projects. Next question. Has the airport performed detailed long-term studies on environmental impact, traffic impact, noise impact, and health safety impact for both Bachman Lake and the surrounding communities for each of the proposed new entrance options? Or does the airport study only very narrowly include the traffic and environmental impact of the airport itself, at the exclusion of consideration of impacts to the park and surrounding neighborhoods? So the answer is a little bit of all. We have not done long-term environmental impact studies, noise studies, or health studies at this point in time, because like I had mentioned before, we are doing it in a scientific step-by-step process where we're looking at a high-level reduction in traffic and emissions, which are environmentally beneficial. Less traffic, reduced traffic volumes will reduce noise and will reduce emissions. But then an environmental impact level study, which will be done, we will be doing a full-scale environmental study for the selected option, the preferred alternate that the council will select. We will do a full-scale environmental study for that project. And like I had mentioned before, our next step, we will be looking at traffic impacts, not so much noise impacts, and impacts to both Bachman Lake and surrounding communities will be part of the environmental impacts study that we will be doing. And at that time, because we'll know which option we are pursuing, what project we're designing, there will be a much more robust conversations about that particular project and its impacts and analysis of the same. So that's how the process will work. As far as does the airport study only very narrowly include traffic and environmental impact to the airport itself? So environmental impacts are never, especially air quality impacts, cannot be measured for a particular point. Because if you know, we have wind, air is constantly moving. So what happens in one area doesn't stay in that area. So environmental impact, especially air emissions analysis, has to be regional in nature. And that's what we've done. And we have found that these 5 options will all reduce emissions and they'll have positive impact. But all our analysis is based on reduction in airport-related traffic. So people who are coming and leaving the airport, those are the people that we are studying to see what impacts they'll have on the regional network. So we are not looking at this project reducing other traffic because we have no way of knowing where people are coming and going. For our project, all the impacts that we have and the positive impacts that we have mentioned are based on reduction of VMT associated with traffic to and from the airport. So impacts to park and surrounding neighborhoods, like I said, the next step will be looking at those issues, detailed traffic impact, and then again, the environmental study will look at these things again in much more details. How much increased airport activity, takeoffs and landings is expected for the new additional entries? So this project will not impact our air traffic. So it's because the dynamics of increase or decrease in air traffic is independent of this project. Question: why not consider a separate APM from Burbank Station? So the quick answer to that is we had considered it, we had looked at it back in 2011, and at that time it was determined that a standalone APM is not financially viable option. At this, and then with our efforts here, we did a quick look at whether we could accommodate an APM if we had an entry from Denton. And what we found was we could not meet minimum safety grades for an APM. So we are not looking. We're not looking at a standalone APM, and we're not looking at an APM system from the Denton side. Why isn't the intersection of Mockingbird Lane and Tollway not a bigger priority? So there's some, just the intersection of Mockingbird Lane and Tollway is in the city, is not within the jurisdictional boundaries of the city of Dallas. And so any widening of Mockingbird Lane will probably not happen. Any construction there is also highly unlikely. But most importantly, that's not something that we can pursue as an airport. That has to be taken up between the park cities and TechStar.
All right, thank you, Aro. Before we get started with our Q&A portion, I wanted to just remind everybody how to send in your questions. And we've been receiving lots of questions, and you've seen, I've posted those in the chat. So we're gonna respond to all your questions. We hope to get to all of them tonight. There's been a lot. So if unfortunately we run out of time and we don't get to your question, we will continue to update the frequently asked questions on our webpage. If you want to see, again, the FAQs that we have thus far, you can do them right here in the presentation by clicking in the upper right-hand corner on your event board to see those FAQs, as well as they are on the Dallas Love Field webpage on our airport projects for alternate entry. So like I said, if we don't get to you tonight, we will continue to update those, as well as we have an opportunity for another meeting September 22nd. So let's move on to your guys' questions. First question.
So first question, why do we need a second entrance to handle an incident at the front of the terminal when we really just need an emergency escape route, perhaps on Lemon? So again, like I said at the beginning of the study, it's not just the terminal, it's the intersection of Mockingbird and Hercular Way, Cedar Springs Road that is very congested. And we have had multiple times, we had issues where first responders were delayed trying to access the airport during incidents. It was also, identified as in our master plan update as an area of concern and something that needed our attention. So it's not just incident, it's just the overall risk factor associated with having the only entrance to the airport at a very, very, very busy intersection and the operational impacts that it has. Has the FAA been included in the possible alternate entry plans? Yes, they are aware of this project, and any project that Department of Aviation does, we have a monthly report to FAA, and we discuss those projects. I mean, this is still a study; it's not a project yet, but FAA is very well aware of these projects, of this analysis. Why can't emergency vehicles use direct path from the fire station on Mockingbird? I watched a gate open to allow ambulances access the airport when the nurses who contracted Ebola were being evacuated. I believe the connection between the station and the runway was at Airborne Lemon Avenue. So the airport, all incidents on the airport are for EMS incidents. We have fire EMS staff, and we have fire department staff who are dedicated to the airport. They have the necessary clearance for operating in what's called the airside operations. But the police and fire department, generally in the city of Dallas, the police and fire department, they're not badged and they're not trained in operating within an area that has active planes and flights. So for incidents where we can use our ARF station personnel or our EMS personnel from for the airport, they are trained to operate in the AOA area, but the General Dallas Police and fire people are not. So they cannot enter through the same route as these guys do. So when we have a situation where we need massive police and fire presence or emergency personnel presence, they cannot access the routes that you just mentioned. Automated people mover is to be located from where and to. So to is easy. It will be to the airport. From where we are generally looking at the Bachman station. We had also considered the Burbank station, but it does seem that the Bachman station is more desirable because it has more parking and it's probably will be easier to design and build than the Burbank station. What has happened since the last meeting? Is this information the same as prior meetings? The answer is pretty much yes, because we have been working in the background on some more refining our analysis, but we are at a point where we need direction from council to move forward to our next step. And we are planning to go to Transportation Committee later this month. And so while we have done, staff has been working on their analysis, there's not a whole lot to report more than what we had presented last time. Next question, is there any consideration for the massive reduction in air traffic and air travel and flight reduction that will happen due to the new normal of business travel? Again, what we have seen is we strongly believe this impact is temporary. It might last 1 year, it might last 3 years, but for purposes of this project, but we're looking at the next 30 years or 35-year horizon. That is not a consideration. And there will be definitely short-term impacts, but we do not expect these impacts to last over that kind of for 30 years. What's the noise level with the APM near a residential area? We haven't studied that in detail. So when we do get into the design of an APM system and the environmental study, that's when the noise levels will be studied. Reduction of traffic and emission on Mockingbird really means just reallocating it to another street neighborhood, correct? These alternate entries just spread the problem around. So I will disagree with that because if we have seen heat maps of where our passengers come from, and over 50% of our traffic comes from the north of the existing entrance point. So people from the north side have to come in. They have to drive all around the airport to get to Harp Kelleher Way. So a lot of that traffic is existing today. There's a lot of people who are using Inwood, who are using Lemon, who are using Northwest Highway or Bluffview to make their way to the airport. Again, Denton Drive. So what we are doing is we're taking those traffic and bringing them into the airport from another point. We're reducing traffic, miles traveled that way, because if you're coming from the north and you can get in into an entry point that is not south of the airport, you've not only saved the extra miles traveled, but you also reduce congestion on the roadways that they don't need to travel anymore. So, so the answer is that traffic is there today, and we are just reducing the number of miles they travel. Mockingbird has traffic issues because of HP and UP throttling lanes on the tollway, all of the way to US 75. Does this have more to do with decreasing traffic along the part of Mockingbird? More so, that traffic issues that may be treated for actual citizens of Dallas or not? So the answer is no. We are not. I mean, it does restrict capacity, the park cities, because of the lane reductions through the park cities. It does reduce the capacity of Mockingbird as it passes through the park cities. But that was not a consideration for us. For us, the consideration was the finding of our master plan update at the intersection of Mockingbird and Harp Kelleher Way was a failure point for the airport with operational impact as well as security impacts. So that's what this project is going to address, the congestion issues as well as the security issues. Next question. I have experienced more significant traffic issues on Northwest Highway than I ever experienced on Mockingbird. That said, for emergency issues, why not have a designed planned drive across airport property on such an occasion between the runways from north for emergency vehicles should the need arise? So what this is saying is, instead of looking at building another roadway, why not just build an emergency exit? And the answer to that is we have directions from council to look at overall environmental benefits, look at reduction in traffic, and look at bringing in APM system to the airport. So an emergency road would, we typically wouldn't use an emergency road. If it's not going to be used by public, building a road that big and wide that can be used for evacuation is not very wise use of our funds. And then again, like I said, it really doesn't address some of the critical issues critical to the council. Why is consideration and impact? Why is consideration and impact to surrounding neighborhoods and property value not part of the evaluation criteria? Definitely, impact to the surrounding neighborhood is and will always remain part of the evaluation criteria. Like I said, uh, our next phase of analysis will look at detailed impacts to all the surrounding streets and impacted neighborhoods. As far as property values are concerned, I am not an expert. None of us here are. But I do believe every project that we have done, which enhances quality of life improvements like trails, bicycle trails and pedestrian trails and streetscape enhancements, should have a positive impact on your property values, not the other way around. Reduction in emissions, reduction in VMT should also have a positive impact. But again, that's just my personal opinion. I'm not a property value expert. Any underground issue below grade could be dug from grade rather than tunneling. My first priority would be a connection to the DART line along Denton Drive. APM from there seems to be the most reasonable for passengers that could not actually consider DART to travel to Lovefield. This would help air quality and water quality and would lessen traffic by using existing infrastructure. So I appreciate those comments, but like I had said, we have looked at that option and not once but twice, and it doesn't meet some critical criteria. It can be, it doesn't meet the minimum design grades, and it's probably not viable financially either. If you build a people mover from Burbank Station, what accommodations would you make for parking at the station? Currently, there is no public parking at Burbank Station, so passengers would have to be dropped off at the station to board the people mover. Very true. Burbank Station we are restricted at Burbank Station, so it's not very suitable for park and ride operations. And that's why we feel, at this point at least, that the Bachman station would be more suitable for people movers connection, because that will offer people the opportunity for park and ride as well as just change trains and come to the airport. For streets that will be affected would be the consideration of how you plan to direct traffic to the north entrance of I-35, of DNT, of LBJ via March, Midway, and Webb Chapel. So we will, we are not at a point where we can answer all those questions. Depending on which option council chooses, we will be looking at that point in time, we will be doing detailed traffic analysis where we actually look at trip distributions, where traffic will be coming from, what will the impacts be, what kind of improvements we need to make, whether we need to add a right turn lane or a left turn lane or maybe another through lane. All those things will be looked at when we get into the detailed analysis. Where people come from, we cannot direct people where to come from, but we could model where they would be coming from and have our design, do our design accordingly. So if you have an additional height availability on the north side, then why could you not include availability of your DART APM option to loop from the existing DART line at Denton Drive? So I'm trying to understand that question. If we have the height, take the APM system from Burbank Station, loop it around on Shorecrest and bring it in from the north side. What that would do is we would have a great, a great length of the APM system that will be standalone, and that's not the direction we got from council. If we have the if the midpoint entry at Shorecrest is selected by council, we could look at where to bring the dart line from. It could be either from Burbank Station, Burbank, or it could be from Bachman. So we'll take a closer look at where to bring the APM in at that time. Denton Drive does have, because it's only 4 lanes, it does have limited capacity. Rumor is that private development is already proposed for the north between the runways. True or false? If true, hotel development and such. So I have to get back to you on that because I am not attuned to what development services or what kind of development goes on. We could have our real estate people get back to you on this.
All right, Aro, thank you. That is all the questions that we have for this evening. I just want to remind everybody that there are options to continue to give input. We talked about our online public input survey, as well as you can go to our webpage where there's more options for input on our social media and other channels. And then just thank you everyone for your comments and opinions. We appreciate your input and feedback. And if there's any specific or direct questions that we may need to research or follow up with you on, we will do that, as well as continue to update our frequently asked questions, which we will post on our webpage. With that said, Aro, do you have any closing comments?
All for attending this meeting, and this is how we get community feedback. So please, if you haven't done so already, take the survey and spread the word around, and do inform people you know who haven't seen this presentation of our next upcoming meeting. We'd love to have you again on September 22nd. Thank you again.